Okay, so last class, we finished chapter 4. In chapter 4, we study consumer and the firm's behavior. We understand how the consumer make work and leisure decision, how the firm to maximize their profit by demanding certain amount of workers or demanding certain amount of capital. Now we move to a new chapter. So what we can do in this chapter, we are going to introduce the government. We studied the closed economy one-period macroeconomic model. So one period is very important in the sense there's no intertemporal decision, means there's no trade-off between today and tomorrow. They only cares about what happened today. So meaning there's no saving decision. Okay. And we're also going to talk about economic efficiency and Pareto optimality. So those are the very important concepts in economics. Right. So actually, so in this chapter, we not only study those things, and later, once we finish, actually, there are two parts. So this is what we're going to do in this lecture, and in the next lecture, we are going to focus on the second half, right? So in the first lecture for this chapter 5, I'm going to explain to you those things, introduce government, and then construct a closed economy one-period macro model, and talk about economic efficiency and a Pareto optimality. And then, so in the second half, we are going to do some experiments. And so the purpose of this experiment to understand some important concepts. So for example, what happens if the government increase spending, or what happens if the total factor productivity increase? How would that affect consumer and firms' behavior? Alternatively, we are going to study if there's a distortion tax on wage income, right? How would that affect, from the government point of view, how would that affect its tax revenue? From the household point of view, how would that affect their work and the leisure decision? And finally, how would that affect the efficiency? Okay. Now let's first look at this one period macro model. Okay, so the key things, there are two key things. Number one, this is a one period, meaning we only focus on today. Number two, so this is a closed economy, meaning there's no import and export. Everything coming from, in terms of resource, all the resource coming from inside the economy, and all the resource will be consumed or will be used inside the economy. So this is a closed economy, right? And finally, this macro model is not micro. So we are using this macro model to study macroeconomic phenomena. So in a sense, we'll focus on aggregate. Okay. So for example, so how I understand what is a micro model? So micro model, so for example, so you focus on representative firm. You just look at the firm, how the firm takes price as a given, and demand labor and the capital. So that's a micro problem. For macro problem, you're gonna take everything together, right? All right. So now let's see. So what is inside this model? Okay, inside this model, we have a representative consumer. So this is something we already studied in previous lecture, right? So what consumers do? So they're going to decide how much to work and how much to consume, right? So this is representative and C and N, and this subscript is called supply, right? Because the consumer is going to supply labor to the firm. When they make a decision, the consumer is going to take wage rate and interest rate. So these two things are taken as given. Right? So if you remember, so actually at the end, what happens is the consumer is going to have a marginal rate of substitution leisure for consumption equal to wage. Right? So now look at representative firm. So the firm does, so they're going to decide how much to produce in order to produce. So they're going to decide how much labor they're going to demand, right? And similarly, so they can take wage and interest rate. So those are price. They take those things as given, all right? And then, so similarly, so we have studied in equilibrium, what happens? In equilibrium, so they are going to do the following. So they're going to choose the marginal productivity of labor equal to wage. So this is what they're going to do, right? So now, in this chapter, we are going to introduce a government. Remember, in previous chapter, we just look at them separately. Look at representative consumer, look at representative firm separately. Okay, remember, suppose take price as given, and then so they can make their optimization problem, right? Okay, now we're going to have a government. What the government do? What the government does? The government is going to raise tax, and then they're going to use the tax to finance public spending. Okay, so let's go one by one. In terms of tax, so there are two possible ways to raise tax. One, like in the following slides, we are going to take a simple approach, which is a lump sum tax. What this means? It just means regardless who you are, you're going to pay a tax. It is independent of your income, independent of your other personal characteristics. But then, so in reality, usually we have a proportional tax, and usually this tax is proportional to your income. Usually we use tau. Okay, tau multiply your income. Okay, so this is the second. But then, so you have more complex tax, usually we call non-linear tax. By the way, here, this is a linear tax, right? Because the total tax you pay is proportional to your income, or is linear with respect to your income. Now, what's non-linear tax? And then the tax, that's called T, total tax you paid, is going to be a function of your income. All right? But for this class, we are going to look at first two. Now, regarding spending, what is the government spending? So usually there are two types of spending. One is the purchase of goods and the service. The other is transfer. Okay, so what's the difference? Purchase of goods and service. So essentially the government pay, and then so as a return, or the government spend money as a return to some good and service will provide to the government. And then what is transfer? Transfer means the government provides without anything as a return from the households. Okay, so that's the difference. Now, finally, to close this model, I want to emphasize we are in a static world. Static means, so you are looking at the current period. You're looking at the current period only. Okay, there's no today, tomorrow, so there's only today. All right, so in that sense, K is going to constant. Okay, so in the future, we're going to study where K comes from, right? Okay, so K essentially is capital, right? Capital. Okay, so if we only look at one period, there's no investment, and there's no point for investment because next period is going to be end of the world. Anything you save is going to be a waste. It's going to waste it, right? So in that sense, capital is going to be as it is. It's not going to change. So that's what we call static world. K is constant. Hence, in that sense, we are going to only focus on labor market, or we can look at NS ND. Right. So this is a structure of this one period macro model. Right. So next we are going to put them together. But the question is why we want to put them together. When I say put them together is in the sense in previous chapter, we look at this and this separately or in a isolated way, right? In the sense for consumer, we just study how they are going to intersect their labor supply, how they are going to respond to wage change. For producer or firm, we're going to study how their labor demand is going to respond to wage change, right? And both sides take price as given, means they take wage as given. We don't know where the wage comes from, right? Now, what are we going to do here? We are going to put them together. Right? So in the sense, they are going to interact. Okay, so they interact with each other. So what's the benefit? So first, we are going to have some consistency. We are going to see, or we are going to make sure inside this model, everyone is doing things that are compatible. What this means? Remember, so you have a households, that is HHD stands for households. You have a firm, so they interact with each other in the factor market. Okay, so this is just LS, this LND, sorry, NS and AND, right? So they take wage as given. Now, so what is compatible means, so I'm going to take this wage as given. I'm going to take this wage as given. And then, so whatever we do is consistent, compatible in the sense, so I'm going to take this wage given. Okay. And then, so what I'm going to supply, remember, so what I'm going to supply is going to determine your MPN. Right. And then this MPN is going to consistent with my choice in terms of labor demand. Or in a simple words, so at the end we are going to see, so make sure N is equal to ND. It's coming up soon, right? And the next, so we can use this model once we just put them together. Okay, once we put them together, we can use this model so as a laboratory to derive some positive prediction from the model. Here I need to explain, so what is positive? Actually, so in science, we have two kind of prediction or two kind of statement. One is positive. The other is normative. Okay. So let me give examples to understand their difference. What is positive? If we observe there's some change in labor supply, and that's what we observe in US after World War II, if we observe some patterns in terms of labor supply. And then the positive prediction is, so based on our model, we can say, oh, so this is going to attribute to some factors. Okay, this is attribute to some factors. Or in other words, so positive is about using the model to explain something we observe in the data. This is positive. What's normative? Normative is more about a judgment. So for example, is a tax policy from the government, is that efficient? Or is that a good policy or optimal? Okay, so this is normative, right? For the moment, so we are going to use this model to derive some positive prediction. Again, trying to use the model to explain what happens in the US macroeconomy. Now we can have an overview of how this model works. Okay. So you have a model or what's the purpose of this model? Okay. You have a model in the middle. So this coming off. Actually, so we already have all the elements, right? Actually, I can write down here. So you have households. So household is going to maximize C and N. Right? This is something we discussed in previous lecture. They are going to choose N. To be precise, N is. Right? And then subject to budget constraint. And in the same on the other side of the economy, you have a firm. What the firm do is going to maximize profit. Right? Let's use pi profit. Similarly, they're going to choose labor demand. Right? Okay. And then so both have take wage, both take wage as given. So this is a model. Right? But then so furthermore, so we can look at the flow of this model. You have some exogenous variable, you have some endogenous variable. But what are in exogenous variable? So exogenous variable meaning, so you feed into this model. Okay, this was given, it was provided, given, you take as given. So this include K, capital Scott. G, the government spending. Z, that's the TFP or the productivity level. Okay, those are taken as given. That means for the model, not only for each side of the economy. Okay. Now, from this model, we are going to derive some endogenous variable. These include wage, interest rate, labor, these both labor supply and demand, consumption, tax, total output. This is a profit and a leisure. Okay, it's going to be clear very soon, right? So to summarize, so this model is going to take this exogenous variable as given. And then throughout the work of this model, you can think about this like a machine. And then this machine is going to provide you with some endogenous variable given as follows, right? Now we are going to define a competitive equilibrium for this model. First of all, what is equilibrium? Equilibrium essentially is a situation or is a state in which no one has incentive to deviate or no one has incentive to change or to modify their behavior. So this is equilibrium. But what does competitive means in this framework? Competitive means either side, they are so small. I mean, for each individual, either the firm or the households. So they are so small, they cannot influence the price. Okay, so they must take price as given. Okay, so this is what competitive means. And then in this equilibrium, so there are three things going to characterize this equilibrium. First is allocation. So allocation in terms of this is like quantity. This includes output, labor supply demand, capital. This again, so this is exogenous given, right? And the consumption. So this is quantity. So like how the economy end up with certain amount to produce, how many hours work, how many capital they have, and how much to consume. So this is quantity. And second is price system, right? So it just tells you what's the price, what's the wage, what's the interest rate. And finally, government policy, okay? It includes tax, includes total spending. Certainly in this competitive equilibrium, few things are given, like K and G. So now these things, I mean, you can find many combination of those three things, right? So you can just randomly throw a number. So like how much to produce, how much to work, how much to consume, what's wage, what does the tax rate look like? So there are many possible combinations. But then in order to be part of a competitive equilibrium, you need those numbers satisfy the following conditions, right? So let's go one by one. First, representative consumer optimize given market price, or in other words, so consumer is going to take W and R as given, and then they are going to optimize, meaning the C and N we have seen from here is going to maximize. So this C and N we've seen from the definition of the competitive equilibrium is going to solve households problem. Now, secondly, or similarly, representative firm, they can optimize given market price. That just means they take W, R as given. And then N and the K we observe from above is going to solve firm's problem. And the next, so you have government budget constraint is satisfied. Okay, so government, how much they're going to spend is going to depend on how much tax they're going to collect. And finally, market, we're clear. This includes goods market. labor market and the capital market. And in particular, I want to focus on labor market. So you can NS equal to ND, right? So this is a competitive equilibrium. Now let's see, so what happened inside this competitive equilibrium? Right, so we are going to do some analysis or do some close examination of our equilibrium. First, in this competitive equilibrium, we have y equal to c plus g. Now you may be wondering, isn't that in previous lecture, when we studied the measurement of the economy, we have the following identity, y equal to c plus I plus g plus nx. Isn't that true? Yes, it is. And this is consistent with this one. So I'm going to show you in two ways. First, let's just go back. Okay, like I said, this is a closed economy and a one period. Closed means, let me erase everything, it's easier to read. Close just means there's no import or export. One period means no saving. Okay, so if you understand this, now we go back here. Now this immediate means, so in this model, this is closed, and one period model, this is going to be 0, this is going to be 0. Hence, we are going to reach this one. This is the first way to understand. Now, alternatively, we are going to do some maths. This coming up. Now let's see. Start with consumer. So this is something we studied in previous lecture, right? So now let's see. So consumer, so they have consumption. The consumption coming from, first they have their income, and then they need to pay tax. But what income they have? This is labor income, capital income, plus some profit. But what's profit? Profit equal to revenue minus labor income. Oh, by the way, this is coming from the firm. Okay, and minus the tax, minus the cost of labor, cost of capital. Okay. So again, let me erase and then just take closer examination. So look at here. As we have NAs and D, right? So that's different because this one is from household side, the other is from the firm side. Okay? And finally, you have a government budget. So T equal to G. Okay? So those three equations. Now, what are we going to do? So first, we are going to substitute T with G. Right, let's go back. Right, so essentially, we are going to use this one, goes to here, right? And then we end up with here. Now, in equilibrium, market clears, right? So that's the definition of equilibrium. So ND and equal to NS, right? Okay, so maybe it's just used here is better. Let me erase everything. So basically, we are going to, what we do is just here, goes to here, and here goes to here, right? So as a matter of fact, I can just write down everything explicitly. So you have C equal to WNS plus RK plus now pi here plus Y minus W and D minus RK and minus G. Okay, so these cancel each other. Now in equilibrium, N is equal to ND. So this cancel with each other. So you end up with C equal to Y minus G. But that immediately means Y equal to C plus G. Okay, so this is how we end up with. To summarize, there are two steps. Step number one, we write these three equations separately. That makes sure you understand how we where each equation come from. Right? This is the first step. Step number 2, you combine the 3 equations all together. So that's going to give you y equal to c plus g. Oh, by the way, so we also have ns equal to nd. So this is coming from, let's go back. This is coming from here. This is coming from labor market clears. Right. Right. Okay. So that's how we end up with, that's how we get here, right? So just cancel each other. So y equals c plus g. All right. So now we are going to solve a equilibrium, right? And the key here, I mean, in terms of solving the equilibrium, is to find out the price, which is a wage that clears the labor market, right? Oh, by the way, so there are 3 market clearance. One is labor market. Second is capital market. Third is goods market. Okay. So labor market is key. What are we going to do now? Capital market here is trivial, or it's not a problem at all because K is given. There's no market. You don't need a market. Now, because that's all you have. There's no trade. You don't save. And the goods market, this is what we just discussed. Y equal to C plus G. This is a good market. Actually, this goods market clearing actually means here. In words, this means what we produce either consumed by private households or by government. Now, what is left is labor market clearing. From labor market clearing, we're also going to find out the wage. Let's first look at production. This is something we have discussed in previous lecture. So now it's kind of recap. Production. So y equal to z times f is a function of k and n. And n, this labor supply equal to h minus L. Remember, L is leisure choice. What is H? That's the total non-sleeping hours. Okay. Average for every person, this is going to be 16 hours per day. Okay. Hence, we can write the output as a function of leisure. Now let's look at what happened in equilibrium. So essentially here, we are going to plug in this, what we call the goods market clearing. Goods market clearing, right? And then this is the production function. This production function is in terms of leisure. And finally, we reach this equation. Now you may be wondering, so what's the purpose of this? So this equation essentially is give us the production possibility frontier of the economy. But this production possibility frontier is in terms of consumption goods and leisure. And this becomes compatible with households. Because what households care is about the consumption and the leisure. Right? So they have a utility. So they are going to derive utility from consumption and leisure. But then, so we do some manipulation of the firms that we erase and highlight. So what have we done, or what we have done here, or reason why we write this equation? Essentially, we just manipulate the firm's production function by including 2 things. One is the goods market clearing. So essentially here. And secondly, so we are going to use this identity, n equal to h minus L. Or in other words, we are trying write everything. So basically these two steps. So we are trying to write everything in terms of C, this is from goods market, and everything in terms of L from this identity. And why we want to write everything in terms of C and L, and particularly this from production side. This is because in the household side or consumer side, they cares about C and L. Now, on one hand, you have their preference or their utility describe how they care about C and L. On the other hand, from the production, you can see what the economy can produce in terms of these two scarce resources, C and L. Okay. Now we're ready to look at some diagrams. We start with diagram A. Okay. So what is this diagram? This is something we are very familiar with. This is a production function. Horizontal line is labor input. Okay, how much labor you have. Vertical line is how much you can produce. And the first, this is an increasing function, right? So this curve is increasing. And the secondly, this curve is concave, meaning the slope is decline. And actually this reflects the decrease in marginal productivity of labor is going to decline when N increase. This is the first one. Now in the bottom, so you have converted production. Right. So what we did here, essentially, we just replace labor input into leisure. Now the curve starts to invert. It's very obvious. Why? Is because leisure equal to H minus N. So that just means the more leisure you take, the less labor you can supply. So hence, instead of increasing, so the production function is decreasing with leisure. This is the second. Now in the third step, so we are going to subtract G from Y. So hence this entire curve is going to shift down. Entire curve shift down. Now this final curve, this one is our PPF. And actually, so this curve corresponds to, let's go previous one, corresponds to this one. Or let's go back here. So this curve, just C equal to Z times F K H minus L minus G. And this curve is going to tell us the trade-off between C on the vertical line and L on the horizontal line. So this is what the economy can produce. But certainly you have to subtract, you have to stop here, right? Because you cannot have a negative consumption. So this is a negative, right? You must have a positive consumption, okay? And then, so in this region, those are feasible, right? And finally, so the slope of this curve is going to be slope of this curve, and finally is also slope of this curve. The slope of this PPF, production possibility frontier, is going to equal to the marginal productivity of labor, right? So now we are going to define a new term based on this PPF. Okay, based on this PPF. This new term is called marginal rate of transformation. And this is a rate at which we can convert one goods into another. And in our previous graph, so the MTRT, marginal rate of transformation, essentially is going to tell us at which rate leisure can be converted in the economy into goods. Right, let's go to the previous one. So we erase everything. So actually slope of this curve gives us the marginal rate of transformation. So this you are going to convert. So this marginal rate of transformation is going to tell us at which rate you're going to convert leisure into consumption. right? Or in other words, so just marginally, so 1 unit of leisure can give you, if you either give up, goes to this direction, or you increase in leisure, goes to this direction. Okay, so if you, say for example, if you increase 1 unit of leisure, how much consumption goods you're going to lose? So this is marginal rate of transformation. Right. Right. So now clearly, so here, so the marginal rate of transformation equal to marginal productive labor equal to the absolute value slope of the PBF. Okay. So now we can derive some key property of a competitive equilibrium. From consumer side, we know this is going to be true. Consumer take what they do, they take wage as given. They are going to choose the consumption bound of C and L such that marginal rate of substitution. So by the way, what is marginal rate substitution? It's the rate the consumer is willing to substitute L for C. Okay, or in other words, so it's a rate at which it is a rate of which the consumer is willing to give up L for C. Now this must equal to wage. Okay, so in equilibrium. So we have discussed in the previous lecture, right? So now for the firm, so what they're going to do, so they're going to choose the labor demand such that marginal productivity of labor equal to wage. Again, so they are going to take wage as given. All right. Now, if we impose labor market clearing, simply you're going to just take these two together mathematically. So you're going to get this. But economically, how we understand that is because, okay, so household take W given, and then you're going to implies a certain amount of demand. So sorry, let me erase here. Let's go again. So two-way. Number one, so these two, so like wage must be the same, right? And then immediately you get this one. But alternatively, you can think as follows. Household take wage as given, and from this optimization condition, so you're gonna derive N A's. And then here, similarly, you're gonna get ND. Market clearing means NS equal to ND. Okay, but then the implicitly just means these two must equal to each other. All right, so this is how we reach the competitive equilibrium. Okay. And then so we can look at the graph, what the competitive equilibrium looks like. So first, this is this curve F, H, this curve. So this is your PBF, what is feasible. For the households, they are going to choose certain amount. They're going to choose certain amount, right? And they are trying to maximize. They're trying to maximize their utility, and certainly the further away, the higher the utility, or the better. The closer to the origin, the worse, right? And then in equilibrium, the best they can do is just push the indifferent curve further away from the origin and tangent with the PBF. And hence we reach here. Right? Let me give you examples of what is not equilibrium or not where you can improve. It could be the case you are here. Okay, and then you are here. Now what happens is you can see, so for the households, it's going to be here. For the firm, it's going to be here. So essentially what happens here is households, so they supply and the NS is too high. It's too high, And it means, so the marginal productivity of labor is too low. All right. So both sides, so they have incentive to change. From the firm side, the marginal productivity labor is too low, and then they don't want to hire, or they want to reduce. Okay, they want to reduce labor demand, so they're gonna make more profit. From the household side, N is too high, but then so they're gonna get a wage. This is the wage that what they're gonna get. So clearly, so the slope of the PBF is too flat. Right, the wage is too low. Right, so the wage too low, but then their marginal rate of substitution, they are very willing to give up leisure. They are very willing to give up leisure for consumption. So hence they want to increase leisure. Okay, so you can see this is not a good solution. Now, right, so we have talked about competitive equilibrium. Okay. So summarize in competitive equilibrium, right? Let me just summarize, kind of repeat. So this indifference curve tend, with this production possibility frontier. And then so here, so you have marginal rate of substitution, leisure, and consumption equal to marginal productivity of labor. Actually, this gives you the wage. All right, so now we have compatibility, we have consistency, right? So the consistency in the sense for the households, they are going to indifference, they are going to be indifferent between work or take leisure. From the firm side, they are going to be indifferent between hire one more or less, or they don't want to change. Right, so this is in competitive equilibrium. Now we are going to look at optimality, and we call it Pareto optimality. We're going to define Pareto optimality as follows. If a competitive equilibrium, as we just discussed in previous one, if we say a competitive equilibrium is Pareto optimal, if the following condition satisfied, there's no way you can rearrange production or reallocate goods such that someone is better off without making someone else worse off. Okay, so meaning you can improve someone without somebody else to sacrifice. Okay, if that's the case, so that's Pareto optimal. Now let's see how we are going to say this is a Pareto optimal. So by the way, so the competitive equilibrium, we just defined, indeed, it is a Pareto optimal. Okay. So if you on the graph, you can see, so first this dots, this middle point. So this is what we define competitive equilibrium, right? But now we also need to show, so this competitive equilibrium is Pareto optimal. Actually, so Pareto optimal is just simply just look at these two. Okay. And then so we have no way to improve one without sacrifice the other. Right. So to understand, so this is a Pareto optimal. Right. So just forget about this middle point. Again, so use the previous example we've seen. So if we have allocation like here, if we have allocate like here, right, in the middle point. So this is not a Pareto optimal in a sense. So in this point, if we move to this direction, meaning so if we increase leisure, So in this point. And then from the households, you're going to increase their utility. From the firm, it's going to increase their profit. So in that sense, this dot is not a Pareto optimal. But now in dot here, there's no way you can improve. There's no way you can improve. Right. So this is coming up. So in the Pareto optimal, you have marginal rate of substitution equal to marginal rate of transformation. And finally, this is equal to marginal productive labor. Right. Now let's go back. So these three equal to each other and understand so what these three equal to each other means. So you have, let's hear, so this from this line, you get marginal rate of transformation. From this line, you get marginal rate of substitution. And in the middle, you have marginal productive labor. Okay, so Pareto optimal. So we are going to focus on this and then this. If these two equal to each other, what this means? So marginal rate of transformation, this is at which rate we can convert leisure into consumption goods. Marginal rate substitution is what? It's at which rate you will willing to substitute leisure, substitute or increase leisure for consumption. Right? Now at this point, so if we increase leisure and then you lose consumption, all right? And now here, yes, the same things, right? So here you increase leisure, you're going to lose consumption. If they're equal to each other, right? So then so everything is going to equal. So there's no way you can improve. Right? So that's how we end up with this Pareto optimal. These three are equal to each other. Okay. And then finally, you have two welfare theorem. Right? So actually, these three are theorem coming from microeconomics. The first welfare theorem says under certain conditions, actually, so our model satisfies all those conditions. Competitive equilibrium is Pareto optimal. But the second welfare theorem is kind of reverse of the first welfare theorem. It says under certain condition, a Pareto optimal is a competitive equilibrium. So here I need to expand a little bit. So how we understand this social welfare. So when we look at Pareto optimal, it's only about allocation. It's only about allocation. Okay, no wage, no market. You can think about the Pareto optimal is just let someone, say the government, to decide how to allocate resource. Okay. And then so they allocate resource such that or reach a certain point, they cannot improve. Okay, so they are the best they can do. And then so in this allocation, this is going to be characterized as marginal rate of substitution, leisure and consumption equal to marginal rate of transformation, leisure to consumption. All right, so this is Pareto optimal. But now this second welfare theorem says, okay, so once we are here, once you find out this allocation, you can construct a wage based on here, you construct wage, and then based on the wage, you create a market. And these markets are going to immediately respond and reach the competitive equilibrium. Right? So this is how they go. Let me just start again. So Pareto optimal, you can think about this someone like a government. So they decide allocation. This allocation, in order to be reach Pareto optimal, it must satisfy this equation. And then once it reaches this equation, and then so you are going to see so whether we can recover a competitive equilibrium. So what you can do, you're going to construct a wage. How we construct a wage is coming up next slide. So once you have a wage and then you give this wage to the market is going to immediately respond. And then, so based on the wage, the market is going to generate a competitive equilibrium. The first reference theorem says, okay, so you have a competitive equilibrium. And based on the market response, you're going to have a wage. And you have some allocation. And this allocation is going to satisfy all the conditions for Pareto optimal. So these two are the two sides of the same coin. Okay. Now let's see how we are going to construct a competitive equilibrium given you reach Pareto optimal. Right. So in this line, tangent with this line, you have Pareto optimal. Now these tangent with each other. Okay, so from the slope of either of this line, you're going to give the wage. Okay, but then so if you give the market this wage, everything is going to clear. Everything's going to clear, right? Why? Because remember, so how we define or how we derive the competitive equilibrium. Okay. Now we have this model. In the remainder of this lecture, we are going to study the following things. What happens if there's increase in government expenditure, or if there's increase in total factor productivity, or if there's change in tax? How would that affect the consumption, labor supply, and the leisure choice? Let's start with the first one. During World War II, the government spending increased dramatically. So this government spending increase was largely used to finance the war, right? So the government basically just purchased military equipment, or they recruit soldiers. So that's considered as government spending, right? And then, so based on the model we have, what would be the impact of such enormous increase in G on consumption and labor supply? Okay. For now, we need to make a few assumptions to understand or to make some predictions. We are going to assume the government spending is pure loss of output. But certainly this is not, but for now, just for simplicity. As a matter of fact, military expenditure provides production for us. Okay. But for now, it's going to mean less consumption goods and service. Now let's see what happens in the model. Okay. So you start with this black solid line. This is our original PBF. Okay. Now remember C equal to ZF minus G. Now if G increase, and if furthermore, if you assume G doesn't bring any utility to us or doesn't bring any good for us, and then so the only impact on the economy is going to push down the PBF. So hence we are going to have this new PBF. Right? This corresponds to G2, and this corresponds to G1. Hence you can see, so you just push down this PBF, and then so you have new I indifference curve tangent with the PBF. So now you have B. So essentially we are going to compare B with A. All right, so what happens? So you can see both leisure and consumption decrease. But actually this is coming from the assumption consumption and leisure, they are normal goods, as we discussed in previous lecture. So now here so you have a pure income effect. Right? So the income effect coming from increase in government spending. Right? So summarize, essentially, so the increase in G has a negative income effect. Okay. So negative income effect. Okay. So it's going to decrease consumption. Okay. And decrease leisure. But decrease leisure means increase in N, right? So leisure is going to decrease because leisure is a normal cost, right? Decrease leisure means increase in labor supply, means there are two things. One is output is going to increase, wage is going to decrease. Why? The MPN is going to decrease. So this means private consumption has been crowded out by increased government spending, or in other words, G increase is going to push down C, right? Okay, and furthermore, so this is going to reduce the well-being of the economy or the households because both C and L is going to fall, but households cares about C and L, but it's actually is coming from here. So you're going to see a lower level of, no, here, lower level of indifference curve. You push down. Okay. Now let's see what happens. Okay. So this is during World War II. Government expenditure, you can see increase substantially. GDP increase, this follow our prediction. C decrease a little bit. Right? So these are largely consistent with our prediction, right? So G is going to, due to the increase in G, Y is going to increase and C is going to fall. And why increase or why output increase is because leisure is going to decrease and labor supply is going to increase. Why C fall is because so the income, the net income of households is going to decrease. So they are going to consume less C. All right. So this kind of summarized, right? So large increase in government expenditure leads to Y increase and a C decrease, but C decrease is a small amount. But there are something very important missing from this analysis. Number one. So actually you can come from here, right? So you can see, so the government expenditure increased by so much, but the government, oh, sorry, so the GDP, let me erase and let me be clear. The government expenditure increased by so much, but the GDP increased by this amount. And C falls by this small amount. Okay, by the identity we have, C plus G equal to Y. But here, so the G increased a lot. And this declined a little bit, but this increased slightly. Meaning, so this outweighed, this doesn't add up in the sense of the increase in G is not enough to cover by the increase in Y and a decrease in C. Just look at it here. What's missing is because in reality, so the government borrows, we call it government debt, right? So understand that 1944, government deficit at the GDP ratio hits 24%, or in other words, the government's, their G way exceed their tax revenue. And then the exceeding amount is 24% of total GDP. And how they're going to finance this exceeding amount? So they are going to borrow. Borrow from who? Borrow from domestic households, firms, investors, or international investors. Okay, so this is how they're going to finance. As a consequence, so the tax is going to change little because the government largely relies on debt borrowing to finance the war effort. The other things missing from the analysis is the increase of productivity. It's because wartime mobilization of production increase labor productivity dramatically, right? Because they can have a better way to mobilize the workers. They can have better, so the government spend lots of R&D, spend a lot on R&D, develop some new technology. Example, like some Motorola invent the first prototype of mobile phone. I think it's World War I, right? So this later has been used for civilian purpose, so increase the productivity, right? So those hasn't been considered in the analysis we have. Okay, or in other words, so the increase in output is going to be larger than our model suggests, because in our model we just assume the fixed z, but because of the war effort, because of the increase of g, usually is going to lead to a potential increase in z, right? Oh, by the way, here just show you deficit. Look at here. So this deficit, these tags. So if without this deficit, then tags going to probably go this level, right? Labor productivity. Look at here. So labor productivity increased dramatically during World War II, right? It's largely because G increased, and part of the G will help to improve the R&D, improve the technology. Okay. Originally, this technology was exclusively used for military purpose, and later it spilled over to civilian use. Right. And this is, to summarize, in this lecture, we study a closed economy and one period macro model. And use this model, we understand the following things. Let me just go back to the earlier slides, kind of summarize. We understand, so what is a competitive equilibrium? Okay, we understand what's competitive equilibrium. Sorry, let's go back. So what have we learned? To summarize. So we understand what is a competitive equilibrium. And they also define what is priority optimal. And from there, we understand, so competitive equilibrium is the priority optimal. And reversely, priority optimal we can restructure the economy so that you have a competitive equilibrium, right? And finally, we use this simple model to understand. So what happens if G increase? How would that affect consumption, leisure, labor supply, output? In the next lecture, we are going to use the same model to analyze the impact of tax change.